Jonathan Mower, thank you for joining me. First of all, shall we get a bit of a background about you? So, could you tell
Okay.
us a little bit about you?
Well, I grew up in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, in a little town. So grew up very much being somebody who would go to school, get home and get kicked out of the house, and so spend most of my childhood running around with barefoot, swimming in rivers. We used to go for holidays up in bush places and coastal places, so I grew up around the outside areas and understanding how wonderful it is to be away from other people.
Eastern Bay. So,
Yeah,
what?
Kawerau.
Kawerau,
Yeah,
nice.
and now my parents live in Whakatane and family live around Whakatane.
Cool. That's a beautiful area.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
certainly is.
yeah. I'm from Tauranga myself.
Oh,
So,
okay, up the coast.
and so you've always been one that's loved to get out into nature.
Oh, yeah, well, I like to wander. Everybody has their own little whakatauki, don't they?
Yeah.
Their little thing, mantra that's inside them. Mine is, the best places are where other people aren't. And that's what I most like. Wander in quiet spaces and you ground yourself and you just your body opens up to what's happening around you. You're hearing the bird song. You're listening to the forests. You're listening to the breeze, the air, the sun, clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Cool. And in Kawerau, were there any places there that you liked to wander in particularly?
Oh well, look, we had the Tarawera River was just down the road from where we grew up as kids. So mostly when it gets very hot in that town in summertime, so mostly we would finish school. My mother wouldn't have us in the house driving her mental, so we used to get home, shirt off, and just get down to the river and just be swimming until you're getting towards tea time
Yeah.
and have to come home.
Cool. Yeah.
I learnt about trout fishing and things, but to be honest, for me, I would do a bit of fishing, but mostly I'd end up putting the rod down on the ground and just going for a walk, climb to the top of the hills,
Yeah.
sit under the trees and watch the world.
Cool.
That
Yeah.
was my childhood.
Tarawera, that's a beautiful place. I've been there a few times.
Yes, and above the mill, the Tarawera River is very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, green and clear and full of eels and fish and birds and things. Below it, it's not so
Yeah.
pretty, but above that, it's a very green, clear river. It's perfect place for kids to swim.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. And so yourself, are you more interested in plants or animals? What's your
Really, well, I mean, I come from a family of people who love to garden. My grandparents, my grandmother was a very spiritual person. My father is a great gardener. Both of my grandparents were great gardeners. And so I love to have my fingers in the dirt. Um, and so I grew up around trees and plants and watching them and seeing them.
Yeah.
And then my life really progressed from that, really.
Cool. So now you're more of into some photography, so you do.
Yes, I kind of progressed from just wandering in spaces. And I bought myself my first decent camera and then discovered how you're able to, the things that most push your buttons, you can use a camera to show other people. That's what I found. And I started photographing buildings, architecture, and then plants. And then one day I went for a walk. I took the ferry over to Rangitoto and went for a walk up to the summit with my camera and was photographing Popokatia, Tieke on that mountain, and suddenly realized I really get this. It's great. You can make the rest of the world disappear looking down the end of a camera lens.
Yeah.
And from there, I posted pictures of the Popokatia and things. And a couple of people reached out to me and said, "Wow, they're pretty good photographs." One was a ranger over in Motatapu, Glenn, and he said, "Oh, you should come over to Motatapu. I'll show you around." And I went for a trip over there and had a tiki tour all over the island. And I wanted to meet Takahe. And I asked, can you show me Takahe? You have Takahe. And it was kind of love at first sight, really. I saw these birds and I've been seeking them out every chance I can since. They're extraordinary, so rare, and their whakapapa is so old and so unusual,
Mm.
and they're beautiful birds. And at the same time, another person reached out to me, and his name was Donald, and has been a guide on Tiritiri Matangi. He had been a guide for a long, long time, and he said, "You should come over to Tiritiri Matangi because I know you'd like this place. I like your photographs, and I can see what you're looking at." And he said, "Come over." And this is completely random. And so I met him on the ferry, and I did what's known as a buddy guide with him. So you follow along with a guide, and you listen to listen to their kōrero, and you listen to the way they tell the story of the island, and talk about the birds. And I came once, and that was it. I was hooked.
Yeah.
And I've been coming back for over 10 years now.
Beautiful. And what's your favorite thing about volunteering on Tiritiri?
Well, you meet some incredibly interesting people, and you get to be up close and personal with some of the true taonga of this land. Um, Very few people can say that they get up and have their cup of coffee after being woken up by a takahe calling. Very few people go for a walk and sit face down on a path and watch tuatara, tieke. There are so many species here that are so extraordinary and so very, very beautiful.
Mm.
Being able to spend time near them is a joyous thing. You know, you ground yourself in places like this. It's meditative. You forget about worries, and it just becomes you in the hihi or you in the saddleback, and that's what I love about.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of close encounters, today I was just as close as I am to you right now with a kokako,
Oh,
just
of
in the
course.
tree right there in front of me. Yeah.
And they were once so widespread, um, and they've disappeared from so much of the country. Same as the takahe, they were diminished to a population of, well, I don't really know how many there were when they were rediscovered in 1948, but it was only in hundreds, and that was a species that once roamed around the South Island, or what is now the South Island. And to come here and just be so close to them is extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's worth volunteering a day of your life every week, like I do. The rewards far outweigh the efforts that you go
Mm.
to.
Tiritiri itself, could you walk us through a little bit of a history, a bit of a crash course through?
Well, Tiritiri Matangi. Historically, if you were to have come here, say 17,000 years ago, the Hauraki Plains were forested. That's Miocene, New Zealand, so the sea levels were very low, and this was a hilltop. But as the ages progress, the sea levels have rose, and it's now an island, and it's been isolated 4 k's from the end of Whangaparaoa for a long time now. Uh, the first peoples came here. First Maori people were coming here. My guess is between 1300 and 1400. Human history in this country is very minimal, but Maori have been coming here for many, many, many centuries. To begin with, around 1400, there were semi-permanent structures here, and people used to come here and hunt kekino and sharks and rays and things like that. But then Te Kawarawa Maki came and built the first pā above what we call Hobbs Beach. But theirs was the first permanent settlement on the island, fortified pā. Um, and about 1700, Ngāti Pawa came here. They built the Papakura pā on the northern end of the island. And then, because of varying reasons, they had left. And then Europeans started coming here. Governor Grey designated it to be a site for a navigational beacon, and they built the lighthouse. Um, but the iwi never returned after that. Was leased out for peppercorn rental to farmers, and it was farmed until 1970. And by 1970, in the end of the farming leases, there was only 4% of the island was forested. The remnant of what I have no doubt was once great coastal broadleaf forest was all diminished and gone to just fingers of forest running through the valleys. And then in 1984, the plan to reforest Tiritiri Matangi and recreate the coastal broadleaf forest was hatched and approved, though the plan at first met a bit of derision by people, and they thought, well, they're going to do it for a little while and disappear. But they didn't, and the city of Auckland embraced it, and people realised what they were doing. They were reforesting an island. It was the first time ever in the world people had recreated or attempted to recreate an ecosystem that had been destroyed. They raised 280 to 300,000 trees on the island, collecting seeds. They built a nursery. World Wildlife Fund gave the first big cash donation to the island, and they built, amongst other things, a nursery. And some people would collect seeds, some people would grow them, some people would translocate them. And we now have an island that's covered 60% forested. 40% is not forested because we have takahe and we have invertebrates and reptiles that don't want to live in the forest.
Yeah.
They want to live in the grasslands. So we have 40% of the island is not forest.
Cool. And you mentioned, was it 4% you said before?
Correct, yeah.
4% of the 60.
96% grassland.
Yeah.
The aerial photographs of this island, when you see them, it is a dry, grassy island with just fingers of forest. Nothing like what you see now. Nothing
Yeah.
at all.
And we were talking about some of those remnants that are still here today. Like the
Correct.
Pahutakawa
Yep.
that you mentioned was actually two different
Yes, it's
trees.
actually two trees that have grown
Yeah.
together. It's often spoken of as being one, but some people from some very well qualified sources have said that's actually two trees that have grown together. But it's a beautiful example of a survivor because, you know, it's estimated to be 900 to 1,000 years old. So that tree was over 2 centuries old when the first Māori were coming here. You know, the waters around Tiritiri Matangi have been a highway for waka, for sailing waka, paddling waka for centuries. And that tree has survived all of that. It's survived the last great eruption of Rangitoto, which would have blanketed everything with ash. It's survived the firing of the forests of this land, the cows having its roots munted by the shorthorn cattle and sheep that were raised on the island. It survived all of that. And you look at that tree and you realize it's an ecosystem in itself. That tree is host. I have zero doubt that that tree is home to many tuatara. It'll be home to nesting sites for kakariki, for tieke. Many birds and animals and invertebrates live in that tree. And you see big branches that are buttressed by kohe that have grown, that have sprouted from seeds dropped by birds beneath the old branches of this tree. And they've grown up buttressing it like the walls of an old cathedral. It's a beautiful spot to
Yeah.
sit and
That's
watch the
incredible.
world go by.
Just how far out it splays as well. It's just,
Oh, yeah, yeah. I guess because it's facing the direction southeast, it's protected from big stormy northerlies. And also it's flowing down the hill. You look at those branches there, gravity is pulling them down so they get to be supported by the land rather than being a sentinel tree that proudly stands on top of a hill and then gets smashed by a big storm.
yeah, definitely a sight to behold if people come to visit this place.
Oh yeah, very, very much. That whole space is above it. There's a new kohe forest that's growing, and Cyclone Gabrielle came and stripped that forest of or most of its canopy. But those trees are coming back now.
Oh, good.
That forest is regrowing.
Could you speak to some of the species that are on the island?
Well, there's the most obvious species would be at the moment your pea waka waka and korimako, the bellbirds, because they really are in your face all the time. But we have hihi, stitch birds, were translocated from Hoturu or Toi, with Little Barrier Island, which is just over our shoulder. They were bought here. That was the last bastion for those beautiful stitch birds. And now we have a great population that's supported by some people, researchers who are at the top of their game. You know, the people who are looking after these birds and running these breeding projects, translocation projects. They're at the top of their game. They bought Tuatara. This is a Tuatara island. So sometimes when you go for a walk at night time, you find Tuatara on the track in front of you, or you're walking along and you see them at the entrances to their burrows. And you know, people in this country don't realise how extraordinary they are as a reptile, the only representative of an entire order of animals. It's highly unusual. They're an ancient lineage of reptiles, and you can sit in the dirt on a warm autumn's day and look them in the eye. Yeah, and that is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible that their fossils are found in pretty much every other country, but they're only remaining back
That's
here, aren't they?
correct. Yeah, well, evolution, that's isolation. You know, we 80 million years we were fully isolated from Gondwana that was disintegrating. And the speciation in this country um, created some extraordinary things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of maintained some species from ancient times.
Yep,
Yeah.
we have matata here, the fern birds. They were translocated here. They were not in the plan for translocations, but when they were building the Northern Tollway, the first stage of it, the engineers found a population of them living in an area that was going to be bulldozed away with the creation of that road. And they reached out to Tiritiri Matangi and said, would you like us to finance the translocation of those birds to this island? And which, of course, no one in their right mind would say no to. And they did. And now matata are found all around this island, and they're a superb species to sit and watch.
Yeah.
Very unique in this country for sure.
And very hidden.
Yes, they are the cryptic champions of the universe. They will sit in front of you and not move. That poor hui over there, Merlin Beck here, that's a happy place for them. And that and the bracken, they can be sitting in front of you. You can be sitting down by the wharf dam there, and suddenly you hear one calling, and it's a meter away from you. And all this time, it's been sitting there and watching you while you're sitting there watching something else, and that's pretty special, really.
Yeah. And now Tiritiri is quite a big kind of tourist destination as well, isn't it? We've got lots of people
Yeah, we
coming in.
get we get very well rated on TripAdvisor. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's as a conservation project, it is known around the world. Because it was the first time that somebody reforested an island like this. Birdie people know of this place. It's a place where people will travel quite long distances to come to. We have the Growing Minds project here, which is um, uh, financed by a very generous donor. And that helps us bring people from schools, from areas of the population who otherwise likely wouldn't have the means to come here. So groups of people from these, they used to be called low decile schools, but not anymore, I don't believe. But we get to show these children this incredible project, beautiful motu, and all of these rare species, and we get to show it to them, and that's an incredible privilege.
Mm. I guess you're introducing to them what you got to do as a kid with the wandering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People who live in the city don't always take the time to get out of a city to find things. But they're here if you go looking for it. And if you want to volunteer for a project like this, you can. And you get to, for me, I don't get to have children, but this is a way that I can make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when you have groups of these children, you might have 8 children, but in that group of 8, there will be one or two people who sparkle, and you know that they're listening and they're hearing and they're getting it. Yeah. And as a guide, the best thing ever you could get to be told, like I have been, well, a couple of times, by these kids is they say, when I get older, I want to be a guide on Tiritiri Matangi. And that's kind of like a little wee, you know, pat on, more than a pat on the back.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I guess it's leaving a bit of a legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I say, you make a difference in the world because there are so many challenges in this country now. There is so little money to run projects like this. Most of these island sanctuaries, island fortresses, um, are run by volunteers or yeah, driven by volunteers. Dock and things tend to have oversight, but a lot of incredibly hard mahi is done by volunteers who give up their own time to make their difference in the world.
Yeah, I guess it's important that it's not just the restoring of these places, but also sharing it. So being a guide and
Oh,
educating the
yeah,
next
yeah,
generation.
yeah. Because you know that some of those people will go on to be doing degrees. Some of those people will go on. They could, doesn't matter what they do, but they will go on to have their own aspect of helping in projects like this. And that's about paying it forward. It's incredible privilege to come here, and I'm never, ever, ever neglectful of remembering that.
Well, unfortunately, we are nearing
Ha,
um, ferry leaving time. This is an interview kind of later in the day. So
that's all right.
we do have to keep this nice and short. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've got so much more to share, and I'll have to come
Oh,
back
I
at
hope
some
so.
point
Oh,
and
yeah, please come back. Please,
yeah,
everybody come back.
yeah,
And as I said to you before, I'm usually the last one on the ferry. It's a bit of a joke, really, but
yep,
I'm usually the one running down the wharf to
yep,
catch the 240 ferry.
yeah.
Uh,
It'll be the both of us
but
today.
it's be worth, yeah. There are worse things in life to be have to spend another night on this island. I can tell you that.
That is true. Yes. Cool. Is there any last things you want to share about Tiritiri or anything before we wrap this up then?
It's an incredible, it's an incredible place with with a great history, and but it's a fragile one. The species we have here, many of the species we have here, are a stone's throw from extinction. It we must never take our eye off the ball. We almost lost the Takahe when they were rediscovered. It was literally their last stand in the Murchison Mountains.
Mm.
And islands like this are the saving grace for those beautiful creatures. So if people want to volunteer, they can. If they want to reach out, they can. You can stay on this island in the bunkhouse, which gives you 3 times the experience.
Mm.
You listen to the dawn chorus that once rang through all of the forests of this land, yet now they don't.
Yeah.
And that's worth coming for just for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree on that last point. I've been here 3 or 4 times already, but I've never stayed the night. And stayed the night today,
Now, the
this time,
big
and
question why? Yeah,
and yeah, I don't think I'd ever come back for just a day trip. Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah,
Absolutely awesome place.
yeah. Amazing. And yeah, I'll leave the links for Tiritiri Matangi's website and
Yep, please
everything
do.
in the description.
Have a look. We do. I work on with a great team of people. I write a lot of the posts for our social media,
Cool.
and so please check us out on. We have Facebook and Instagram. We have a great website. Stacey runs a great blog, which people write for. Yeah, please follow us and
Wonderful.
come back.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jonathan. I know it was quick.
My pleasure, matey. My
Yeah.
pleasure.